Hello, my name's Tim and I'm a photo book addict. But not all books are created equal, and sometimes what you need isn't actually a photo book, but something that explains deeper topics and ideas to improve your skills. So in this video, I'm going to talk through 10 books, not only about photography, but also about growing as a creative person, that over the years have helped me take my street photography from sort of average, boring images to exciting ones that I'm really happy with. So let's get right into it. The first book on this list isn't actually a photography-specific book at all, but since it was published, it's gained a bit of a cult following from creatives all over the world, from loads of different artistic fields, and that is The Creative Act by Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin is one of the most successful music producers of all time, relying not on technical skill per se, but more on his own unwavering confidence in his personal taste and creativity.
What makes it great is the personal.
Yeah.
With all of its imperfections, with all of its quirkiness, that's what makes it great. How you see the world, that's different from how everyone else sees the world. That's why you're an artist. That's your purpose in sharing your work with the world.
The book isn't really about music specifically, it's about being creative and how to live a more fulfilled life as an artist. It's full of bite-sized paragraphs which I often dip in and out of when I need a jolt of motivation, or even a change of perspective, or when I really just want to think a bit deeper than the surface level about the art that I want to make. For example, here's a quote from the book that I think is really powerful. Living life as an artist is a practice. You are either engaging in the practice or you're not. It makes no sense to say you're not good at it. It's like saying, I'm not good at being a monk. You are either living as a monk or you're not. We tend to think of the artist's work as the output. The real work of the artist is a way of being in the world. When I felt down or uninspired by my photography, and sometimes even this YouTube channel, I've picked up this book and it's done wonders for my motivation and also for my outlook on life. Next up, we've got On Photography by Susan Sontag, and this is, in my opinion, essential reading for any photographer, and I know it's compulsory reading on many photography courses and qualifications out there. It was written in the 70s, so it's a little bit dated, but having said that, many of the topics and themes covered in this book are as relevant today as they were back then. For example, one of my favourite quotes from the book is, "Like every mass art form, photography is not practiced by most people as an art. It is mainly a social right, a defence against anxiety, and a tool of power." Which for me really highlights how prevalent photography is in our society and the importance of approaching it from an artistic standpoint rather than as something everyone has access to. After reading this, I constantly find myself thinking, how can I make the best photos possible, and what am I really trying to say with my work? It's pushed me to experiment and try new things, which has kept street photography fresh and exciting for me. When we start thinking this way, it's inevitable we start to make more of an intentional practice with our photography, which to me is one of the best ways of improving and making work that we're really happy with, and not just making pictures for social media. When I was first starting out in street photography, I didn't really know exactly what it even was, and it's such a broad genre that it's actually really difficult to properly pin down a definition. My loose definition has always been something along the lines of candid photography in a public place, but that deserves exploring deeper in a whole set of other videos. But when I first picked up Magnum Streetwise, the world of street photography became so much clearer to me. For those of you that don't know, Magnum is a collective of world-renowned photographers which was founded in the 40s. While Magnum members are certainly not all what you might describe as street photographers, much of the work created by the masters has transformed the world of photography over the years. While most of the Magnum photographers would probably not classify themselves as street photographers but more as documentary photographers, many of them in their careers have spent a lot of time documenting life out on the street, which is what this book is all about. It pulls together a collection of incredible street photography from all over the world, and I love it. Sometimes we can get sort of lost in the never-ending options out there when we try to learn a new skill like street photography. So that's where Think Like a Street Photographer by Matt Stewart comes in. This little book's a bite-sized manual to all things street photography, and anyone from beginners to advanced street photographers will get something out of this book. It's broken down into easy, digestible topics, and it's well illustrated with Matt's whimsical photography. For example, my favourite chapter is all about looking out for certain gestures or objects on the street, which when I put this into practice, I started noticing so much more out of my photo walks, which is essentially what street photography is all about, documenting life in an interesting way. Matt really highlights the importance of learning and developing our skills, as well as constantly observing the world around us, and definitely not taking ourselves too seriously, as well as different approaches to take to try and capture unique compositions. This is a great little book for anyone looking to level up their street photography skills quickly. I go through periods where I'm incredibly inspired. I get out on the street every chance I get, and I feel like I'm on fire, and I could never imagine not having motivation for street photography again. But then the next week, for some reason, my spark's gone and my motivation and inspiration have completely gone out the window, and I just feel terrible. I don't know if that's something that you can relate to as well, but I think it's definitely common as a creative person. But sometimes just realising other people have the same struggles as you, and also knowing some of the techniques to overcome feelings of doubt and lack of inspiration can really help you push past those difficult times as a creative, and that's where this book comes in. The War of Art. This book teaches you how to recognise and overcome the resistance that's holding you back in your art, and also how to not let the fear of taking risks or fear of failure keep you from making progress. It's also a great reminder of fostering a healthy outlook on what we create and why, summed up in this quote from the book. We must do our work for its own sake, not for fortune or attention or applause. If you can get past the sort of religious overtones in this book, if that's not your thing, it's an absolute goldmine for ways to overcome the struggles that us creatives face. Although it's not a photography book, I can't recommend it enough if you ever feel like you get stuck with motivation. Getting over the fear of showing your street photography can be a big deal for us, especially if you're new or if you don't have much of a social media following. If you're anything like me, on occasion, I'll take a photo I'm really happy with, I'll post it on Instagram, and it absolutely tanks. No comments, hardly any likes, and it makes us miserable. And as we know, it's no use living our lives through social media, and the reaction people have or don't have to our work on those platforms has no bearing on the validity of the art that we make. But I think we'd all be lying if we said that it doesn't affect us when work doesn't go down well on social media from time to time. But sharing our work is so important, and not just a finished article. Sharing our process, our thoughts, our failures, our successes, it's all part of being an artist. And once I read Show Your Work, it was a light bulb moment for me and really pushed me to create more, not just sort of photography, but on YouTube as well. It's a really easy book to read with simple bite-sized chapters, so it's easy to dip in and out of. If you ever feel like you're not good enough, what's the point of even sharing your work, then read this book. As we've discussed already, there are many times when I lack inspiration, but also times where I feel like I'm repeating myself, or I've run out of ideas, or even fall out of love with my work. That's where this book has had such an impact on my own photography. It's packed full of photographers' work, some of which is actually really hard to see elsewhere because the original books are now out of print and they cost a fortune to buy. Some of my favourite work in the book is by Jeff Mermelstein, but also when I saw this one shot by Cristobal Hara, it absolutely blew my mind. The composition and content is amazing, and it really refreshed my perspective on what street photography can actually be. Although it's not really street photography now anymore because the book was published back in 2010, it's still a fantastic resource filled with street photography, but also information about the photographer's process and their stories. I can't recommend this one enough. If you've not heard of Joel Meyerowitz before, then stop this video right now and go look up his work. He's one of the greatest street photographers of all time, with a life's work spanning decades. His photography is as diverse as pioneering street scenes laced with humour, to documenting world events such as the aftermath of the Twin Towers, to still life, landscapes, and so much more. If Meyerowitz doesn't know something about photography, it's probably not worth knowing. So with all that experience, how I make photographs is a must. I've learned so much from this book, and it's again split up into easy to digest categories to dip in and out of. It's small, and I used to actually take it along with me on every photo walk that I went on to refer to on the bus or the train or on a coffee break. The portion of the book that resonates with me the most is on the chapter engaging your head as well as your heart. In Joel's words, don't just look, reflect on what you're seeing and keep exploring. Rather than settle for images or just pretty shapes and scenes we come across, Joel taught me to really think deeper, ask more questions of myself, and really push my work. For example, when I see a nice scene of light and shadow now, I don't just snap a minimalist shot and move on. My mind whirls now with how I should capture the moment in the most meaningful way. This was so powerful for me because it broke the mold I was in, churning out variations of the same idea over and over, and instead it forced me to get out of my comfort zone and try new things. Ultimately, my street photography and how much fun I have doing it has increased so much once I decided to push myself in different directions. This is the second Magnum book on the list, but you really can't beat the collective of world-class photographers with work spanning decades. This book is really exciting because it doesn't just focus on the single image, but instead it explores how Magnum photographers create bodies of work based on a theme or a story. Recently I've become very interested in a more documentary style of street photography, looking to create long-term projects based on themes or events. This book is full of valuable information on how each Magnum photographer goes about documenting a story, and the collections of work in it are nothing short of spectacular. Sometimes I can be guilty of always searching out that banger photo, which is so rare it can make me lose motivation for the practice of street photography completely. But Magnum Stories has shown me the power and importance of putting images together into a series. That while maybe the images aren't outstanding on their own as single frames, when put together they tell a deeper story of a place or an event, which is something that's really resonated with me and carried over into my event street photography recently. So if you want to start exploring making bodies of work, projects and deeper documentary photography, then this book is a must-have. I must say, quite often these days I come across new street photographers who really have no idea about the history of street photography. They tend to be inspired by Instagram and YouTubers, and while there's nothing intrinsically wrong with that, if we don't know the history of street photography, then we're kind of doomed to repeat it. I read this book cover to cover, and while there really is a truckload of writing in this massive book, and it's a little bit flowery in places, it's also filled with nuggets of wisdom and images spanning decades of street photography. For an historical resource, but also to dip in and out of for ideas and inspiration, you really can't beat this book, and it should be on every street photographer's shelf in my opinion. There are so many more books I can talk about on this list, but let me know in the comments below what your favourite street photography book is, and if you think I've missed a major one out on this list. Reading even just a few of these books will definitely help you with your street photography and creative abilities, but to really improve as a street photographer, you have to put the theory into practice. So to help you do that, check out this video next, which dives into some of the best advice I've learned over years of doing street photography. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.